Imagine someone proves you wrong, not with insults, not with force, just facts. And instead of relief, you feel threatened. Your chest tightens, your mind races. You don't lean in, you push back. Here's the unsettling truth. Humans don't defend beliefs because they're true. We defend them because they feel like us. And once a belief becomes identity, facts stop being information. They become attacks. We're uncovering why the human mind would rather protect a story than accept reality. And once you see it, you'll never argue the same way again. The moment facts become dangerous. Think about the last argument you had. It probably did not start as a fight. It started as a conversation that slowly tightened your chest. Politics, religion, parenting, money, different topics, same feeling. At some point, something shifted, and you were no longer exchanging ideas. You were defending yourself. Notice what actually hurt in that moment. It was not the statistics, or the sources, or the examples. It was the implication hiding underneath them. Facts have a way of carrying a silent message. They do not just say you might be mistaken. They suggest that something you relied on might be unstable. A fact does not simply whisper you are wrong. It whispers something far more unsettling. Who you are might be built on sand. That single implication is enough to change everything. The conversation stops being about truth and becomes about survival, and the brain reacts accordingly. Your nervous system does not know the difference between a social threat and a physical one. When identity is questioned, the brain responds as if something vital is under attack. Heart rate increases. Attention narrows. Curiosity disappears. In that state, facts stop being information and start feeling like weapons. Here is the strange part that almost no one notices. The smarter someone is, the more dangerous this reaction can become. Intelligence does not automatically create openness. Very often, it creates better defenses. A sharper mind is better at finding loopholes, reframing contradictions, and explaining away discomfort. This is because intelligence does not remove bias. It refines it. It gives bias better language and more convincing stories. Instead of asking whether a belief is true, the mind asks how it can be protected without looking irrational. And it often succeeds. That is where the real trap begins. We start to confuse confidence with correctness. We mistake mental speed for clarity. We assume that because we can argue well, we must be seeing clearly. But in reality, we may just be building thicker walls. The danger is not ignorance. The danger is unexamined certainty. The moment facts threaten identity, even the most educated mind can become a fortress. And once the doors are closed, truth does not bounce off because it is weak. It bounces off because it is no longer welcome. Beliefs are emotional contracts. We like to think our beliefs are the result of careful thinking, that we weighed evidence, compared arguments, and arrived at rational conclusions. That story feels flattering. It makes us feel autonomous and in control, but it is rarely true. Most beliefs were not discovered. They were inherited. They were absorbed quietly, before we had language for doubt, from parents who needed stability, from cultures that rewarded agreement, from fear that punished isolation, from the deep human hunger to belong. Long before logic entered the room, emotion had already signed the contract. A belief, at its core, is not just an idea about how the world works. It is a promise that says, if you accept this story, you will be safe, you will be loved, you will not be alone. That promise is powerful, and once it is accepted, it sinks deep. This is why challenges feel so personal. When someone questions a belief, it does not register as a debate about facts. It registers as a threat to a bond with family, with community, with identity itself. The mind does not hear, "Is this true?" It hears, "Will I be rejected if this falls apart?" And so the brain asks a brutal question, often without words. Do I choose truth, or do I choose my tribe? For most people, this does not feel like a choice at all. It feels automatic. The body tightens, the tone shifts, the defense activates, reaction takes over. And reaction feels like certainty, because it is fast, emotional, and familiar. Certainty, in this sense, is not confidence. It is comfort. It is the relief of staying aligned with what has always felt safe. This did not happen by accident. It was trained. From an early age, agreement was rewarded with warmth. Questioning was met with silence, discomfort, or punishment. Over time, the lesson became internal. Do not challenge what keeps you connected. So beliefs stopped being tentative explanations and became emotional anchors. Letting go started to feel like betrayal. Doubt began to feel dangerous. That is why changing a belief is rarely an intellectual event. It is an emotional rupture. It requires the mind to tolerate loneliness before clarity arrives. And for many people, the cost feels too high, until they realize something quietly devastating. The contract they are protecting was never about truth. It was about fear. The brain's loyalty program. Your brain did not evolve to help you see reality clearly. It evolved to keep you alive. Accuracy was never the main goal. Survival was. And for most of human history, survival depended far less on being right than on being accepted. Thousands of years ago, being wrong about the weather or the stars rarely killed you. Being rejected by the group often did. Alone, you lost protection, food, and status. In many cases, you lost everything. So the brain learned a simple lesson early. Staying connected mattered more than being correct. From that pressure, the mind built a priority system. Belonging comes first, truth comes second. This hierarchy still runs quietly in the background of modern thought, even though the environment has changed completely. That is why contradictory facts do not feel neutral. They do not arrive as harmless data points. They arrive with emotional weight. They feel intrusive, unsettling, sometimes even aggressive. The brain does not respond by saying, "Interesting, let me consider this." It responds by saying, "Danger." Once danger is detected, a different system takes over. Attention narrows, emotional reasoning spikes. The part of the mind responsible for calm evaluation steps aside. In its place comes instinct. Defend, justify, push back. This is why arguments rarely lead to understanding. The moment a belief threatens belonging, the brain is no longer listening for accuracy. It is listening for threats. And reason cannot function properly under threat. But here is the darker realization. The mind does not stop at rejecting uncomfortable facts. It goes further. It rewrites them. Details are selectively remembered. Context is adjusted. Motives are questioned. A fact that once felt solid becomes suspicious. Not because it was disproven, but because it was inconvenient. Over time, an entirely new version of reality can form, one that protects identity while still feeling coherent. This process is mostly invisible to the person experiencing it. From the inside, it feels like thinking. From the outside, it looks like distortion. And the more emotionally invested someone is, the more convincing the distortion becomes. The brain rewards this behavior. Every time a belief is defended successfully, anxiety drops. Relief follows. That relief reinforces the pattern. Defend the story. Avoid the threat. Stay aligned. What looks like stubbornness is often loyalty. Loyalty to safety. Loyalty to connection. Loyalty to an old survival program that no longer fits the modern world. And until that program is seen for what it is, facts will always feel dangerous. Not because they are wrong, but because they challenge the one thing the brain was trained to protect above all else: belonging. Rationalization, the silent weapon. We like to believe we argue to get closer to truth, that debates are about discovery, that disagreement sharpens understanding. But most arguments are not journeys toward clarity. They are fortresses built after the conclusion has already been chosen. Long before words are exchanged, the mind has decided what it wants to protect. The conversation is not an exploration, it is a performance, and the goal is not to learn. The goal is to win without appearing irrational. So, the brain does something both brilliant and unsettling. It turns logic into a defense attorney, not a judge, not an investigator. A defender whose job is to justify the client at all costs. Evidence is not evaluated evenly, it is filtered. Supporting details are highlighted and repeated. Conflicting information is brushed aside as irrelevant, biased, or flawed. Contradictions are minimized until they feel small enough to ignore. Exceptions are amplified until they look like proof. This process feels like reasoning from the inside. It feels thoughtful, careful, even sophisticated. But what is actually happening is protection. The mind is constructing a narrative that allows the belief to survive without triggering internal conflict. This is why two intelligent people can look at the same fact and walk away with completely different conclusions. Not because one is lying, not because one is stupid, but because each is defending a different psychological shelter. A belief is not just an opinion, it is a place to stand, a sense of stability, a way to feel oriented in the world. When that shelter is threatened, rationalization becomes a survival tool. From the outside, it looks like denial. From the inside, it feels like clarity. That is what makes rationalization so powerful. It does not announce itself. It disguises itself as logic. It borrows the language of reason while quietly serving fear. And the more someone values being seen as rational, the more convincing the rationalization becomes. Complexity is added, nuance is introduced. Doubt is redirected outward. The argument grows smarter, while the thinking grows narrower. Once you see this mechanism, a haunting question starts to surface. If beliefs shape perception so deeply, how often are we actually seeing reality as it is? And how often are we seeing armor built to protect who we think we are? This question is uncomfortable because it does not accuse others. It turns inward. It asks whether our strongest arguments are expressions of truth or expressions of attachment. And once that question appears, it does not go away easily, because every certainty now carries a shadow, and every confident explanation quietly asks to be examined, not to be destroyed, but to be understood. When belief becomes identity. The most dangerous beliefs are rarely presented as beliefs. They are framed as character traits, as moral positions, as identity statements, not what I think, but who I am. I am a good person. I am rational. I am informed. I am on the right side of history. Once a belief takes this form, it stops being flexible, it hardens, it fuses with self-image. And from that moment on, any challenge to the belief feels like a personal attack, even if no insult was intended. This is where conversations begin to collapse, because the disagreement is no longer about ideas, it is about worth, about integrity, about whether the person sees themselves as valid. So, when someone questions the belief, the mind does not register curiosity. It registers threat. You are not attacking an argument. You are attacking the self that argument is protecting. That is why conversations escalate so quickly. Voices rise, tone sharpens, listening disappears. Facts are mocked instead of examined, not because they are weak, but because they are dangerous. To accept them would mean admitting something far more painful than being wrong. It would mean admitting that the self-image might be flawed. For the ego, this feels like self-destruction. Not metaphorically, neurologically. Studies show that threats to identity activate the same brain regions as physical pain. The body reacts as if something vital is being torn away. So, the ego makes a choice. If reality conflicts with identity, reality must bend. This is why people distort facts without realizing it, why they reframe events, why they question motives instead of evidence. The goal is not deception, the goal is preservation. Because dissolving a belief that defines you feels like erasing yourself, and the ego would rather twist reality than face that void. But there is a cost. When belief becomes identity, growth slows to a crawl. Learning becomes dangerous. Curiosity becomes selective. New information is judged not by its accuracy, but by whether it flatters the self. Over time, this creates rigidity. Relationships suffer. Conversations become performances. Listening turns into waiting for your turn to defend. And beneath it all, a quiet anxiety builds. Because maintaining identity through belief requires constant vigilance. Every challenge feels exhausting. Every disagreement feels hostile. The tragedy is that identity was never meant to be this fragile. The self does not need certainty to exist. It needs honesty. But that realization requires a terrifying step, separating who you are from what you believe. Until then, beliefs will continue to masquerade as identity, and any challenge, no matter how gentle, will feel like a threat. Not to an idea, but to the self holding it together. The price of psychological comfort. Beliefs feel safe. They wrap reality in familiar shapes. They soften uncertainty and give the mind somewhere to rest. Facts do not do that. Facts feel cold because they do not care how you feel about them. They arrive without reassurance and leave you with work to do. Beliefs give certainty. They offer clear lines between right and wrong, us and them, meaning and chaos. Facts demand adjustment. They force revision. They require you to update your mental map, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in ways that shake the entire structure. So we cling, not because beliefs are always true, but because they are comfortable, even when they limit us, even when they quietly cause harm, even when they keep us stuck in patterns that no longer serve us. This is not a personal failure. It is a human one. History repeats this pattern endlessly. Entire societies protecting stories long after facts made them obsolete. Stories about power, morality, identity, destiny. The evidence was often visible. The contradictions were not hidden, but letting go felt unbearable. Because abandoning a belief is not just an intellectual update, it is an emotional loss. It means admitting that sacrifices were made for something incomplete, that certainty was borrowed, not earned. That comfort came at a cost. So the mind chooses familiarity over accuracy, again and again. Psychological comfort acts like a sedative. It dulls anxiety in the short term, but it also dulls perception. Over time, the gap between belief and reality grows wider. And maintaining the belief requires more energy, more justification, more denial. This is where harm creeps in quietly. Decisions are made on outdated assumptions. People are judged through inherited narratives. Problems are treated with solutions that no longer fit. And the discomfort that should signal change is numbed instead. Here is the uncomfortable part most people avoid. We are not immune to this pattern. We like to believe we are more enlightened than those before us, more informed, more rational. But comfort works the same way in every era. We are next in line. Right now, there are beliefs we protect not because they are true, but because they make us feel oriented, because they reduce uncertainty, because they spare us the pain of revision. And we defend them with the same language every generation has used. This is different. This is obvious. This is settled. Until it is not. The danger is not that beliefs exist. The danger is that comfort becomes more important than accuracy. When feeling right matters more than being right, growth stops. And stagnation begins to feel like stability. Unless something changes, unless we learn to tolerate the discomfort of adjustment, unless we value clarity over certainty, unless we accept that psychological comfort has a price, and that price is often paid in the currency of progress. The question is not whether beliefs make us feel safe. They do. The question is whether that safety is worth what it quietly costs us. The rare skill of letting go. There is a skill almost no one is taught, and it may be the most important one of all. Not how to argue better, not how to defend a position, but how to let go without falling apart. The ability to say, "I was wrong," and still feel whole. Most people hear that sentence and feel resistance immediately. Because from an early age, being wrong was framed as failure. It meant embarrassment, loss of status, shame. So the mind learned to avoid it at all costs. Over time, avoiding error became more important than learning. But this skill is not weakness. It is psychological strength. It requires something far more demanding than confidence. It requires internal stability. Letting go means separating identity from belief, self from story, worth from certainty. It means recognizing that beliefs are tools, not extensions of the self. They exist to help you navigate reality, not to define your value as a human being. When this separation happens, something profound changes. Facts stop feeling threatening. Correction stops feeling humiliating. New information is no longer an attack. It becomes an upgrade. People who can do this do not fear facts. They use them. They do not collapse when corrected. They adjust. They refine. They evolve. Their sense of self is not fragile because it is not built on being right. Instead, it is built on being honest. This is why such people often appear calm in disagreement. They listen longer. They ask better questions. They are not in a hurry to defend because there is nothing fragile to protect. Their identity is not on trial. That does not mean they are passive or uncertain. It means their confidence comes from adaptability, not rigidity. They understand that reality changes, and any belief that refuses to change with it becomes a liability. Letting go does not happen all at once. It begins with small moments, pausing instead of reacting, saying, "I need to think about that," admitting uncertainty without rushing to fill it, allowing discomfort to exist without immediately trying to erase it. At first, this feels destabilizing, like stepping off solid ground, but then something unexpected happens. The fear fades, the mind relaxes, and a quiet sense of freedom appears. Because maintaining rigid beliefs takes constant effort, letting go releases that tension. You stop guarding every conversation. You stop scanning for threats. You become more present. And once you taste that freedom, belief loses its grip. Not because you stop believing in anything, but because belief stops owning you. You remain intact even as ideas come and go. That is the rare skill, and it changes everything. Why truth feels lonely at first. Here's the final paradox, and it catches almost everyone off guard. Letting go of protected beliefs often feels isolating, not because something is wrong, but because something familiar is gone. Comfort loves crowds. Shared beliefs create instant belonging. Agreement feels warm because it signals safety. When you repeat the same conclusions as those around you, connection comes easily. You are seen. You are affirmed. You are inside the circle. Clarity does not work that way. Clarity often begins alone. The moment you stop repeating inherited stories, the room can feel quieter. Conversations change. Some people pull back, others become defensive. Not necessarily because you are attacking them, but because your independence reflects a freedom they are not ready to face. At first, this loneliness feels like loss. The mind wonders if something valuable has been sacrificed. It questions whether certainty was worth giving up. This is where many people turn back. Not because the old beliefs were true, but because solitude is uncomfortable. But if you stay with it, something shifts. You stop needing to defend, because there is nothing to prove. You stop needing to win, because victory no longer defines your worth. The nervous energy that once fueled arguments begins to dissolve. Listening replaces reacting. Curiosity replaces posture. You start hearing what people mean instead of preparing your response. And disagreements lose their charge. They become information instead of threats. This is when reality changes texture. It no longer feels like an opponent pushing against you. It feels like a landscape you are learning to navigate. Sometimes challenging, sometimes surprising, but no longer hostile. The loneliness fades, not because you return to the crowd, but because your relationship with yourself stabilizes. You realize that belonging does not require agreement. Connection does not require certainty. You also begin to notice something subtle. Others who value clarity find you. Conversations deepen. Silence becomes comfortable. You are no longer bonded by shared conclusions, but by shared honesty. Truth, in the beginning, feels lonely because it removes borrowed certainty. It takes away the noise that once reassured you. But in that quiet, something stronger forms, a sense of alignment. You are no longer defending a position. You are standing in awareness. And from that place, reality no longer needs to be conquered or resisted. It can finally be met, not with fear, not with armor, but with openness. And that is where truth stops feeling lonely and starts feeling like home. Humans don't protect beliefs because they're sacred. We protect them because uncertainty feels like death. But growth has always required risk, and truth has always demanded courage. The question isn't whether your beliefs are right or wrong. The real question is this: are they tools for understanding or shields against fear? Because the moment you stop defending identity is the moment reality opens up. If this made you uncomfortable, that's good. Discomfort is the doorway to clarity. And if you value truth over comfort, keep questioning, keep listening, and stay here. Because the most dangerous belief is the one you never realize you're protecting.